We do all of these things like the TA would be against violence. He never came back after leaving to get bread. His daughter was killed. His wife passed away. Bill Dolly was a TV star who made people laugh for many years. Behind the cameras, though, things were going badly in his life. The popular co-star from I Dream of Jeannie and the Bob Newhart show died by himself in New Mexico at the age of 91. Not in Hollywood at all. Fans forgot about him and never knew the terrible pain he was in his whole life. It was hard when Bill Daly was born. He was born in Des Moines, Iowa, on August 30th, 1927, but his father left the house to get bread 2 weeks after he was born and never came back. That one simple action changed everything that happened after it. During the Great Depression, his mother Fern was left to care for a new baby by herself. There was not any money, help, or one to talk to. In a world that wasn't very kind to single moms, she had to raise Bill by herself. The story of Bill's dad going missing to get bread was often told as if it were a funny joke, but it wasn't. It hurt like hell. It's even stranger that the boy who was left behind would go on to make people laugh for a job. Fern kept going. To support Bill, she did any job she could find. She kept her head up even though things were hard. She had won a beauty show before, and she kept that grace even when things went badly. Bill watched her struggle with pride and quiet strength as a child. They had a house on Hartford Avenue. He thought of little things that made him happy, like going to the F&W Grand Dime store on Walnut Street. In a youth full of doubt, those times stood out. Back then, people were mean to single moms, but Fern didn't let that stop her. She did everything she could to help her son. Everything changed again in 1939 when Bill was 12 years old. Fern moved them to Chicago by packing up their things. The city was very big and loud. It wasn't like Des Moines, but it was lively. It was loud in clubs, full of players, and people at home listening to radio shows that told stories and made them laugh. The city was full of life. For Bill, it was both scary and exciting at the same time. The world started to get smaller in Chicago. That boy from Iowa who had lost his father was no longer just a boy. He was a part of something bigger. Bill never had an easy time in school, though. One of the best places in the city, Lane Technical High School, is where he went. The lessons were hard, and Bill was having a hard time. He had no idea why it was so hard for him to read and keep up. That time, no one talked about having trouble reading. People thought you weren't very smart. That's how Bill began to see himself. After many years, he would say, "I'm slow. I'm not very smart. Best." It takes a lot of practice for me because I have dyslexia. To be honest, it showed how hard he had to work just to keep up. But he didn't give up. Even though things were hard, Bill Daly never meant to become a comic. In fact, music was his first love. In the late 1940s, he played upright bass in a jazz band from the Midwest called Jack and the Beanstalks. He was really good. He learned how to keep time by listening to jazz. Being able to time things well would become the most important skill he ever learned. Bill would start telling jokes during those gigs in between songs. At first, it was just something to do while the band took a break, but people found it funny. They liked him. Soon, some people were coming for the comedy as well as the music. By 1952, he was known for more than just playing bass. He was also known as the person who could make everyone laugh in a room. Things went wrong for him that same year. During the Korean War, he was forced to join the army. At first, he had to learn how to use weapons, which had nothing to do with comedy or music. His funny side didn't stay hidden for long, though. In less than 3 months, the army moved him to their entertainment section. That's when things began to make sense. He joined forces with the well-known accordion player Dick Contino, and the two of them went on tour to play for soldiers. Bill still played bass, but the best parts of his show were the breaks in between songs. His quick wit and friendly tone made tired soldiers laugh. When he left the army in 1954, he had already done more than 200 shows. Those years not only made him love acting even more, but they also showed that he could keep an audience interested even in the worst situations. Bill didn't waste any time when he got back home. He went to the Goodman Theatre School in Chicago after moving there. When I went from army shows to acting classes, it was a big change that wasn't easy. He worked as a doorman at the Drake Hotel at night, and then rushed to class early in the morning without getting much sleep. He even sold shoes and vacuum cleaners sometimes to make ends meet. He meant it, though. He really took in everything he learned about voice, movement, and stagecraft. It wasn't just gut anymore to be funny. His goal was to learn how to shape it. He worked hard, and it began to pay off. By the end of his last year, producers began to pay attention to him. He started getting small parts on local TV shows. Every bit of work that was done during those years, every nervous interview and sleepless night, set the stage for what was to come. He went to school at the Goodman Theatre in Chicago and then got a job at NBC station WMAC-TV. He started out as a speaker and floor manager, but soon enough, people saw that he could do more. He worked his way up to become a staff director and learned how everything really worked. This put him right in the middle of the humor, letting him see how it was put together, delivered, and paced. He had trouble reading and writing because of dyslexia, but it made him smarter in other ways. It was hard for him to read lines, so he learned to use his quick mind and think quickly. He joked that he might not have learned how to be funny if he wasn't confused. He met important people at work who would become important to him later. Bob Newhart was one of them. Daly even helped him out in Chicago during a big Emmy show. He began doing stand-up comedy at night while still working a full-time job. He worked in places all over the Midwest in the late 1950s and early 1960s. He had played music before. After coming home from the Korean War, he played stand-up bass in a jazz group. His jokes were just a few funny lines between songs at first, but people loved them. Soon the jokes took over after the music stopped. He slowly turned into a full-time comedian. His style was shaky and a little disorganized, but it was always sharp. It worked. By 1960, he was performing regularly in places like Chicago and Cleveland, but he was still working at WMAC during the day. It all changed after one of those trips to Cleveland. He would drive there on his days off to work on the Mike Douglas show. He didn't just show up on picture. He wrote and directed short films too. Mike Douglas liked him and made him a regular on the show. At first it was a small business, but the show quickly took off and spread across the country. Soon it was shown in over 170 countries and millions of people watched it. This was a big moment for Daly. He wasn't just a guy from Chicago anymore. His appearances on the show really helped him get known. He can build his style with the sketches. Quick, strong, and sometimes silly, but always smart. There was still work for him to do in Chicago, but people in the business were starting to notice. He also began writing comedy for well-known people at the same time. Steve Allen, Mike Douglas, and Merv Griffin. A lot of people watched these entertainment shows. At the start of the show, he was only making $750 a week, but he was glad to be working. He was sure the show was great, but the money wasn't really coming in. But what Bill did while the cameras were rolling was what really made him stand out. He didn't always do what was written. Just enough to surprise everyone, he'd say something or change how he came into a scene. That kept the power going. When Bill threw something unexpected at Bob Newhart, who played it straight, he often had to hold back laughs. The actress Suzanne Plachette, who played Bob's wife, wasn't safe either. That was how the whole set looked. Not too strict, but fun and sometimes hard to guess. They would all go to a nearby restaurant called the Tail of the Cock together at the end of the day. It wasn't just actors. It was a group of friends. But Bill found it very different to work with Bob. Before that, he was in I Dream of Jeannie. Larry Hagman liked to practice every scene over and over again until it was just right. It was the other way around with Bob. Bob didn't practice much. He believed it kept the show interesting. At first, that scared Bill. He didn't feel fast enough, and his dyslexia made him move more slowly. The worries didn't stop Bill, though. He changed. Even better, Bill helped Bob get a big break when he was able to perform at the last minute on a local Emmy show. He broke it. Bill knew something big had just happened as he watched from the stands. As more people watched the Bob Newhart show, Bill's face started to show up in other places as well. Match 73rd game. Even though he was only a guest at first, his charm quickly won over everyone. He was quick, funny, and at ease with being himself. He became a constant in the end. All of a sudden, he had to run from one studio to another. cracking jokes in two very different ways for both a sitcom and a game show. He had to remember lines on one set. He had to think quickly, but he was able to do it. Bill Dolly was always the funniest person in movies. He was great as Roger on I Dream of Jeannie and as Howard on the Bob Newhart Show. Things didn't go as planned when it was his turn to be the star. He got the lead role in a show called Small and Fry in 1980. He played a doctor who was scared, and this could be his big break. Having been the backup for years, he was now the star, but the show was only on for 3 months. People stopped watching, so the network turned it off. After 8 years, he tried again with a new comedy, starting from scratch. He played a vet who was divorced and got along better with his ex-wife than he ever did with her when they were married. It was a good idea, but the time wasn't right. It played on Saturday nights, when most people weren't watching TV, and was cancelled after only 1 season, just like the first one. Stupid. Daly saw these as more than just bad shows. They were chances that were lost. He was good at what he did and everyone knew his face. But being the star was tough and the chances were against him. He went back to stand-up comedy after the Bob Newhart Show finished in 1978. Although it kept him busy, it didn't make him as well known. As the 1980s came around, the stage lights went out. He began to show up on TV shows as a guest star on The Love Boat and Love, American Style. Maynard's. These were fun shows, but they weren't as important. It was changing in Hollywood. Older people were quietly being pushed to the side as new people came in. Daly didn't just stand there, though. He made 3 TV shows called Bill Dolly's Hocus Pocus Gang in 1982 and 1983. The shows had young magicians on them, and Dolly could share his love of magic with a new generation. It wasn't fame from a show, but it was important to him. As the business world changed around him, he found small ways to keep being creative. After that, Aleph came out in 1986. Dolly played Dr. Larry Dykstra, a therapist who comes to deal with Alf's strange behavior. It was a small part, but it worked really well. The smart inside joke was picked up by fans of the Bob Newhart Show. Jack Riley was also in the episode. He had played a nervous patient on Newhart's show before. Now Riley was still scared and Dolly was the doctor who was calm. In a fun way, it turned their old roles around. One scene has Dolly's character see Alf for the first time. They say, "Oh my God," in a polite but shocked way. Dolly always does things that are funny, low-key, and right on the mark. That part showed everyone that he still had great comedic timing, but TV didn't call as often as it used to. He changed a lot in 1987. He changed his address to New Mexico and took over as head of the state's film commission. Even though it wasn't acting, it kept him in touch with the business. So, using his name and experience to promote New Mexico as a place to film, he tried to bring movies and TV shows to the area. He made a smart choice that gave him something to do when playing jobs had slowed down. Even after leaving Hollywood for a while, he stayed involved in the media for many years. He was a regular host on an Albuquerque radio station from 2006 to 2009. He wasn't looking for fame anymore. He was just having fun and staying active. Bill Daly was always in the shadow of his helper. He tried to run his own shows, but it didn't work out, and the business went on without him. He changed, though. What made him happy were magic tricks, helping other people, and changing the future of movies in new ways. Bill Dolly made money by making people laugh, but behind the jokes, he was going through a lot of sadness and trouble in his personal life. In 1949, he married Patricia Anderson for the first time. He had some hard times in his early years, but they stayed together for 27 years through it all. But as his fame grew, so did the stress. They slowly fell apart because of long hours, travel, and the attention. They split up in 1976. He got married again after only 4 years. Vivian Sanchez was her name. They fell deeply and quickly in love, and soon they were on tour together with a play called Lover's Leap. It sounded sweet, but they found it harder than they thought to work together every day. That marriage also ended after only 3 years. Bill fell in love again in 1993. Her name was Becky. It lost this time. Before Becky died in 2010, they were together for 17 years. Bill was 83 years old at the time. In his old age, he had lost the person who kept him grounded. Bill became a dad too, but not the way most people do it. He took in 2 kids his own, Patrick and Kimberly. It wasn't easy, but it changed his life. He worked 12 to 14 hours a day on I Dream of Jeannie. He laughed and said, "I see my kids on TV more than I do in real life." There was some truth to that joke. He still had long work days after he moved on to the Bob Newhart show. On screen, he was a relaxed bachelor, but in real life, he worked hard to be a good dad. He said he missed a lot of things in an interview in 1985, like Patrick's high school graduation. He said it was one of the worst things he had ever done. He did what he could, though. He had the kids come to the set and watch him work. He even used some of their stories in his comedy, but nothing could have made him ready for 2010. Kimberly, his daughter, who had developmental problems, was last seen. She was only 16. After a week, her body was found. He was broken by it. A few months before, he had lost his wife, Becky. Now this. He said that his last part was in a small movie called Horrorween in 2011. He didn't act again. He made Albuquerque his home and stayed there for more than 30 years before moving to Santa Fe. He loved the view, the peace, and the quiet the most. He told his son Patrick that his dad would often say, "Look at that view of the Sandia Mountains from his apartment window. Isn't it beautiful?" That simple happiness summed him up. Bill thought that being happy wasn't a natural state of being. Every day you made that choice. He wasn't totally gone even after he retired. In 1987, he was in charge of the New Mexico Film Commission and helped bring more movie projects to the state. He was also a regular host on a local Albuquerque radio station from 2006 to 2009. People in the area still loved hearing him on the radio because he still had great comedic timing and a friendly personality. He wasn't just a TV star to them, he was a family member. Still, he found time to get back in touch with old TV friends. One of the most moving times for him was when he saw Barbara Eden and Larry Hagman again on the Donnie and Marie show in 1999. After 29 years, all 3 of them were back together as the popular stars of I Dream of Jeannie. Their fans were thrilled to see them back together because they still had magic together. Before that, in the 1980s and early 1990s, he made 2 reunion movies for the show, but Hagman wasn't in them. The group got back together on Larry King Live in 2002, when the show was added to TV Land's schedule. In 2004, Bill and Barbara Eden got back together at the TV Land Awards and gave a show together. He also worked with the Bob Newhart show on anniversary episodes and had a fun guest part on Newhart's later shows, which showed he hadn't lost his edge, but his last few years were less busy. His wife Becky died in 2010, which was a terrible loss for him. Since 1993, they had been married. He then moved to Santa Fe to be with his son Patrick and his family. He was still the same happy man who found comfort in being with people he cared about. 91 years old, he had a birthday in August 2018. He died quietly at home on September 4, just 5 days after that. Like the kind of person he was, there wasn't a big wake, no tribute for everyone. He always said he didn't want sad people to mourn his death. He told them to have a party. He lived his life with fun grace and a deep love for the little things that make life worth living. His ashes were spread out in the desert outside of Santa Fe, bringing him back to the place he loved so much many years before. He had a great sense of humor, which his son Patrick said was the best gift his dad ever gave him. A gift that used to make a lot of people laugh and lived on in the people who knew him.